We ready? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Wow. I am Andy Hatton, the superintendent of Findlay City Schools. Thank you so much for being at our second town hall that we are doing this year. We hope to continue to do these and engage with the public moving forward. Tonight's topic again is on district finances. And so we've been taking questions online for about a week. And we're going to have some amazing students coming around here soon to collect your questions. And we'll get them over here. And we're going to blend in the questions that we got online and the questions that we get from this amazing audience. And they will be projected right here for everybody to see. And we'll dive in on that. So we're going to jump in. And before we get started, we've got a couple amazing facilitators here who are going to introduce themselves, kind of set the stage, and then we'll just go ahead and jump in.
Thank you, Andy. Rex Howard, and I'm going to let my wife do a little more talking than me. I've been a little under the weather.
He's a smart man, isn't he? Well, my name's Kelly Bibler, and just thanks again for being here tonight. We are certainly honored that you asked us to come back and moderate this wonderful informational session. Just a reminder, as Dr. Hatton said, you know what, I would stand up, but I'm exactly the same height, so. As Dr. Hatton said, this is about district finances only. If you have other questions, I'm sure he would be happy to meet with you to answer those questions at another time. We just ask that everyone be respectful. Hopefully I don't need to bring that up, but just in case, we know we have a lot of people who may not see eye to eye here, but we want to ask that you all respect each other. The cards are back there at the table, so if you have a question, raise your hand, and the wonderful students will come around. And like Dr. Hatton said, we had a lot of questions submitted online, so we'll mix those in as well. We will keep it going. That's our promise to you. We have one over here that has a question. Thank you. That's our promise to you. We'll be done by 7, so you can get home and get your jammies and get all snuggly buggly in bed. And then I want to thank our students as well for being here. So that's our story. We're sticking to it. We look forward to helping to moderate this event tonight.
And then as we jump in, I also want our amazing panel to go down the line here and introduce themselves so everybody in the audience knows who's here.
Thank you, Dr. Hatton. My name is Chris Aldrich. I'm a member of the Findlay City Schools Board of Education, and I'm glad to be here and hopefully help answer some of your questions.
I am Susan Russell, also a member of the school board. Glad to see everybody here and look forward to a good session tonight. Thanks.
I'm Matt Cooper. I'm the president of the school board, and also happy to be here and hopefully get some more information out to the public for the vote for the schools on May 6th.
I'm Pam Harrington, the treasurer for Findlay City Schools. I've lived here about 45 years and had 3 children that went through the system, and I'm glad to be here.
And I'm 45 years old.
Yeah, that.
All right, here we go. Question 1, what exactly is the levy money going to be spent on specifically?
Well, we talked a lot about the buckets. The buckets is a phrase we've been using a lot, and there's 3 buckets, and I'll start with the ones that aren't involved in this. Okay, we have a PI bucket, which pays for capital expenditures, which are 5 years or more, and it's very well regulated, so we cannot use PI money for operating. We have a bond bucket. The bond bucket essentially holds the mortgage for the 3 new buildings. This is one, Donnell and Glenwood, and also the Millstream building. Okay, that bond money goes right into that bucket and gets spent for those buildings right there. And then, so what we're here tonight, we're talking about the operating bucket. This levy is going to be an operating levy. It is an operating levy, which means that it goes toward the operational expenses of running a school district. So we're talking about salaries of all the employees. We're talking about maintenance costs. So it's for staff, it's for everything to do with running the school district besides building buildings or improving infrastructure.
All right, next question. Why did you not ask for a levy when other counties were in 2004?
I'll start and then pass it off to Matt. So in 2004 was the last time that this school district passed new operating money. We had a levy, the levy was passed, and so the revenues that our district are using today are the same revenues that were approved by voters in 2004. There's been things on the ballot since then. I'm not going to go into details like that about those, but they are not operating funds. That was the last time we've received new operating funds. And because of Ohio's unique laws, our operating money has not changed. We are receiving the same local operating money that was voted on and approved by the voters in 2004. So we're not really sure, but that's the answer to the question. So if we want to clarify, if somebody has another question to clarify that, that would be great.
I really don't have much to add. I'm not quite sure what the question is, except for, I think part of the problem is, I was 24 when this happened, by the way, when we passed. You know, if you think about that, that's the last time we passed operating funds here. If I could speak for the board back then, moving forward until we were all elected to the positions that we're in, I wish we would have asked for an income tax earlier, and we wouldn't be in the position we're in today. You know, they decided not to for various reasons, and here we are. We are very unique in that respect, considering I've looked around the entire state to try to find other school districts that have survived for 20 years without new operating money, and you can't find them. So I don't know if that answers the question. It's not quite clear to me, but that's where we're at. Oh, hang on.
Just one clarification. So if you recall, in 2020, the district was also in a position in which we saw operating funds coming to an end. And so in 2019, actually, the board made the decision to go on the ballot, and we went on the ballot in 2020 3 times. And that was for property millage. 5.9 in March of 2020, 5.9 mills again in August of 2020. And then we dropped it, and we're going to do a combination of cuts and reduced millage. Went for 3.9 in November, and we actually lost at that ballot by more than we had lost at the prior 2. So that we have gone to the voters before seeking new operating funds, but then in 2020, COVID hit. So 3 failures of the levy at the ballot, COVID hits, ESSER money comes in. And if you recall, after we lost 3 times at the ballot, we also closed Lincoln, sold Lincoln School, reorganized the entire district down to, and repurposed Jacobs to be a preschool. We repurposed Washington to be our administration building and got out of a lease doing that. And we added modulars to the intermediates so that we could expand, go to kind of 2 north, south, and central K through 2 and 3 through 5 buildings. So we'd made some significant changes and had some significant cost cutting after the levy failed in 2020. And then COVID hit, like I said, and the ESSER funds have kind of bridged the gap until we are where we are today, because those COVID funds ran out in September of 2024. So that's kind of the history here, just in that time period. But there have been attempts, the board has recognized this. It's deficit spending is something we've been working on, and cuts we've been doing ever since I've been on the board, which has started in 2018.
I'd also like to add just a little bit as well. In 2020, when we were on the ballot and we had lost 3 times, we listened to the community, because the community was telling us, look, we did not want to have property tax for our schools. So we took that information and we listened, and that's when we started to really start to apply our strategy. Okay, what do we need to do? Because we're hearing the community. How do we approach this? Because we know down the road we're going to need some money, because we can't live off of the money from 2004, because we know that things are increasing in cost. Our insurance costs are increasing dramatically. These are things that we know are coming down the road. And then COVID hit, and it bridged this gap. But during that time, we were able to do additional research and found out that income tax is a way that we can address what the community is telling us. And so that's why we got to where we're at now.
All right, next question. If it passes, what cuts are going to be made? Seems like school overspends with the funds that they have been receiving.
Do you want me to launch into that one? Okay. So the Board of Education, when the Board of Education was on the ballot in the fall of '24, and we were unfortunately unsuccessful, the Board of Education looked at, to stabilize the budget, we needed to cut about $6 million in our operating budget for this the next school year, by the fall of '25. So in December, they considered over $7 million in options. And then in January, the Board of Education adopted a resolution of $6 million in operating cuts to the school district for next school year. And actually in March, just last month, the first, I'd say, million, Pam, if I'm getting this right, just over $1 million in those cuts was adopted by the Board of Education, and it started with administrative positions and some programming. The other things that the board is going to be considering and taking up here in April and in May and into June as we look at this, and I think they're being very prudent about this, very judicious about this, and they're really looking at each of these items, but it's going to entail staffing cuts, teacher cuts, small increases in class sizes at the elementary division, programming cuts. We're looking at potentially 92 supplemental positions. And what does that mean? That means think assistant coaches in sports or assistant directors in the fine arts, performing arts for those extracurricular activities, those kind of things. Those extra opportunities that we're so very proud of that we offer here in Trojan Country. So those are the things that will be, that have to be in place because we have to stabilize the budget, not only with this ballot initiative, but with the cuts going into next year.
I think those are all pretty much related to the same,
Oh, I see.
they're all in the same.
Why are we waiting till now? Yeah, Chris just talked about that. I think Stephen just addressed that second line. When the levy fails, we try again or actually make the cuts you keep threatening. So the cuts are happening. They have to happen. We don't have a mechanism in state law to live outside of our means, right? Or the state would come in and take us over. So that's why we are now in a position that we have to make the cuts. Does somebody want to talk about when we collect, like why do the cuts have to stick for 1 year? Let's say we're successful in May, hopefully. Yeah, do you want to talk about that?
So if we're successful in May, the way, this is an income tax, it's an earned income tax. The way an income tax works, as we're all very well painfully aware, it begins accruing in January. So it's a calendar year collection. So there's actually, it's an 18-month gap between the point in time, and it starts in January, okay, so calendar year. So if we pass in May, starting in January of 2026 then, it begins accruing. And then we all don't pay our taxes until the next April, and that's just the beginning of it. And so we won't fully get the funding from, even if it passes, until July of 2027, July of 2027, because it starts accruing in January 26, and it's 18 months later that we fully get the benefit from that new funding. So it's a long lead time for that funding, but it will allow us to diversify our income, our revenue stream. It will rise and fall with the success of the community. It will allow us to be part of that. And it gets us kind of away from an over-reliance on property taxes, which is a good thing, and the state has asked us to do. Yeah.
The other thing that I want, those that ask these questions, and if these are top of mind for anybody here, and these are good questions, the other thing that Pam and I will be recommending to the Board of Education, like, as it's been stated, it's been over 20 years now since voters approved new operating dollars for Findlay City Schools. Operating dollars help us hire and retain the best people to be with our students. And these are very painful, but now we're at this crossroads where we have to make these cuts for next year. However, we cannot continue to cut our way to success. This is not a sustainable path for this amazing school district. Having said that, once we pass, and once we stabilize this budget, and once we start to build back better, we will be recommending some of the cuts remain relatively permanent. And I want those that are asking these questions to really know and understand that. There are some things in the budget that I do think that we can tighten our belts and build back better and serve our kids to the expectation that this community has, but we can make some of the cuts, maybe around $1 million, just under $1 million, and I put it in air quotes permanent because I don't want to speak for a superintendent 10 years from now or a board of education 15 years from now, but I think in the short term we can definitely continue to be very frugal with how we are spending taxpayer dollars.
I know we keep addressing these, but it's probably going to rope in a couple more questions and that we might hit on later. But, you know, the drastic cuts thing, there's evidence, and I hear people talk about, you know, Findlay needs to focus on academics, and that's exactly what we are doing. And when I went to school here and graduated from here, this community was very proud of the school district. And there is an absolute, you can track it almost to where academics started to slip based on the fact that they didn't have the funding. So what did they do? They made cuts that you guys in the community didn't feel. Maybe our students felt them, maybe our staff felt them, and they were drastic internally, but not felt externally. And there's just an example I hear about administrators. You have too many administrators. Well, when I went to school, I had my own principal plus a head principal here, and that was in 1995 through 98. I was at the high school. In 2010, we had one administrator for every 117 kids. As of last year, we have one administrator for every 151. So cuts have been made. You just haven't felt them. And unfortunately, I don't like the cuts either. I have kids in the district. But we're at a point where we've asked over and over. And if you want to see our academics get better, we need the resources to do that. So 2004, and you can go home and check it. You can look at, you know, where Findlay City School District was in 2008 and the decline of academics. It's directly tied to not having the resources to start to enhance academics.
Okay, I do want to add just a little bit onto that because Dr. Hatton touched on, are we making the cuts? And the answer is yes. We've already made the commitment to the state. So we've already had to have our fiscal plan to the state to be able to say how are we going to ensure that we're not deficit spending, and that's part of our plan. So we've already started in April, and then we'll be continuing as well. So just want to make sure that we're transparent on that you guys know that's where we're headed.
Okay, next question. How do you justify paying the amount you do to Coolidge and his wife and to have a subpar FFE season with no grand championships, and he doesn't even attend rehearsals? Could you have just given Manley a raise to stay? Not like the culture is any different with Coolidge, just hidden and not investigated due to embarrassment, I'm sure.
Okay, I'll take this one. There's a financial aspect to this one, so it's fine. Last year, we had a director who is arguably one of the best, not only in our region, but in the country. And he asked me to attend the national competition at about this time last year because he really wanted me, as a new superintendent in this district, to really understand the scope and the size and what it takes, the effort it takes not only on his part, but of all the volunteers to engage in a bedrock, foundational, cornerstone, I'm trying to think of other analogies, of the pride of our, not only our high school, but our community, the Findlay First Edition. And when we were out there, he and I talked about, I said, this is too big for one person. So we agreed to have, and I committed verbally to an assistant director to support him. And he ended up obviously taking another opportunity somewhere else. And so knowing how important and amazing FFE is, and I saw how hard those kids worked, we were committed to finding the absolute best and doing the best we could to find an amazing director to try to fill those shoes, which is just darn near impossible. So that's why we hired David Coolidge. We also wanted to keep that verbal commitment, and for me it was to those students, and so we hired an assistant director. Because again, this is one of the premier, not just show choirs in our county, in the region, in the state. We are known all throughout the region. And when one of the things I want to keep in mind too is they just went to nationals and were second runner-up, best costumes, and most improved. And I don't want it to be lost that how amazing those kids are and how hard they work. And it also makes me think about, this is what separates Findlay City Schools from other school districts in our area and honestly in Northwest Ohio. We offer opportunities that other schools just don't have. And that's why it has been 20 years since we've had new operating dollars, and facing these $6 million in cuts, which are going to impact these opportunities. I commend the board because they challenged us to mitigate the impact on all of our kids. Because the FFE students are a great example because they're not just in FFE. I don't know how these kids do it. They take incredible class loads. They're in 10 other things, from the musical to our drum line that just won the states again. They're in We the People that won the state and is going on to nationals. Our kids love to do it all and experience all of these amazing things. So that's why I will stand behind the decisions that were made to backfill those shoes and the investment that we made into our students in FFE.
Okay, I have a couple questions. I'm assuming they're in the same area. When were financial, oh, you know what, I can't read this. When were financial advisors
Treasurer
slash tre-
alerted
Thanks for
of a
helping me out.
deficit.
And then the second question is, how
Have
are
the financial advisors, treasurers contacted similar districts about their budget spending? Lebanon, ? So maybe we start with Mrs. Harrington. You have a microphone over on that table, actually. What do you mean it's not fair? It's fair.
I'm not going to stand up and do a dance or anything.
Okay.
I'm not going to move around.
Is it on? Okay.
Now can you hear me?
Oh, there
Okay, there it goes. So I've been doing this for about 30 years. And so school districts are allowed to run deficit for a couple years. Deficit means we're spending more than we're bringing in. Okay, it doesn't mean you're out of cash. It means we're spending more than we're bringing in. So typically you can go 2 years, and sometimes back before about 8 years ago, you could go 5 years, as long as you had a plan, as long as you had a community that committed to passing levies for you about every 2 to 3 years. Because of the way House Bill 920 works, and I won't dive into that right now because that's a fun topic, but I don't think we have enough time. But let me explain something to you about that. The way it works, we do not get inflationary growth on property. It's very complicated, and if you ever want to schedule a meeting with me, I'd love to meet and talk about it. But think of it like this. Every 2 or 3 years, I was in 4 other districts, always lived here, but I commuted because of certain reasons, family and things like that. But I want to let you know that when those districts every 2 or 3 years passed those levies, they were able to stay above that inflationary growth. What happened in Findlay was, think about it, we didn't have new money since 2004. Then we failed a safety levy, right, I believe, because I've only been back 2 years, so I'm getting older. And then we failed a property levy, so we failed 5 in a row. So they came to me and said, now Pam, you've been doing this long enough. You have to know that certain districts, when you don't have a levy history of passing, that's what's going to happen. So they came to us like a summer, it was probably about 18 months ago. And that's when we started looking. And we said, you know what, we're going to look at, because we still had COVID money, They were kind of giving us a little bit more time because we had some COVID funds, because that kept us, all of us in here, from having to pay taxes for 3 years, additional taxes.
Mrs.
because that
Harrington,
filled
when
it
you
in.
say they,
Oh.
it's not like a financial advisor.
Oh.
It's who's
The state.
The
I'm
state.
sorry, the State Department. So the High Revised Code is driven in the State Department. It sets the rules for treasurers in the state of Ohio for school districts. They're like our boss. No, you guys are too, but I mean, they're the big boss. I mean, they're the ones, the keeper of making sure that everything's being distributed properly and that there's no fraud, things like that. And I was at a district with fraud, but again, that's for another day. But so basically, when you think about it, so why I asked him that straight up, because one of the people that came was kind of a friend, and then had to stop because, she was a friend. And she said, well, I can tell you right now, what pinged you was you have not passed levies for so long for new money. You haven't passed any levy for 5 tries. Our concern is, are you going to be able to, like other districts, they'll be deficit 4 or 5 years, but they're passing levies to kind of get above it, and they can build that into their forecast. How can I build that into a forecast without the reassurance that we're going to pass it? And what I heard loud and clear was no more property. I've heard that from my neighbors. I heard it at Kroger. I heard it. Well, we do not want to pay. Our property taxes are high. So that's why we looked at a different option. We brought in a financial advisor, Rockmill Financials. His numbers, my numbers were within $200,000. So basically, about 18 months ago, they told us, and we started looking at every option to not overtax us.
And so the state, just to wrap up this piece, and I know you two want to say some things, the state comes in and says to the treasurer, and I don't want to speak to some other school district, but they monitor there's over 600 public school districts in the state of Ohio. And they will come in and say, okay, you haven't passed, you're trending towards deficit, what's the plan? And then Pam, the treasurer, has to submit the plan, and that's why we have to be on the ballot. And then because if you don't, there is fiscal watch, there's fiscal emergency, and then there's fiscal takeover if we can't stabilize the budget. So then now we can turn it over.
Keep in mind, we did that whole process and it was open to the public. We had board meetings where it's actually on board docs. If you use our website, go to board docs, you can see the written plan where we had to map out the positions, what we were going to do. It took a lot of time, and without the help of the Assistant Superintendent Muller and Dr. Hatton and the board, it would have been a daunting task. It took us all summer. Because, it took a lot. They kept coming back saying, no, you got to do more. We kept saying, well, we don't want to. We don't want to cut more. We don't want to cut more.
So, I would like to talk about this just a little bit and bring up hiring Mrs. Harrington. I trust Mrs. Harrington. She is the greatest treasurer, and I'm not just saying that because she's sitting next to me, but even our previous treasurer told us we needed to get to the ballot. That's why we went on the ballot and asked for property tax. And this has been a need in Findlay City Schools for quite some time. Did we know? Did we ask advisors? Sure we did. Have we talked to other treasurers in other districts? Absolutely. And she's a part of a treasurer's group. But we went out and hired Mrs. Harrington because she is the best of the best at what she does. I mean, she literally saved Perrysburg from a fraud case. So did we go get her? Absolutely we did. So we hired Rockmill Financial to come in and make sure, just trust and verify that we were doing the right things for our community, which was open to the public on April 15th of 2024, that they presented. It's also on YouTube if you want to watch it. Their numbers matched, and we looked at finances, what we should do, what we can do with our community, and what we should ask for that would keep us off the ballot for the longest amount of time. That was our goal. And, to the question about did we ask other people and talk to other treasurers, absolutely we did. We have been doing that. And I've been in the room when those conversations happen, and I was certainly in the room when Rockmill presented their numbers, and that's why we're here today. It hasn't only been just Mrs. Harrington saying we need the income tax. It's been outside groups, which also took a deep dive into our books. I hear or have seen things on social media about a forensic audit. We've had 2 audits with no finding for recovery. I don't know how many more you need, but the need is there.
In fact, we get audited yearly, and our most recent audit was posted to the State of Ohio Auditor's website on March 27th. We've already reviewed it as a finance committee and gone over, but it is clean, is without findings, without any fiscal mismanagement. It's out there for anyone to pull down and read and review.
And I just want to add as well that the trust but verify is very important for us. And so with Rockmill coming in, one of the things that they noted that we needed to have was a financial policy. So that way we have a way to understand what we are asking for from the community and what are the parameters. So in order to do that, we had to develop a finance policy so that way we know going forward, this is the levels that we need to be at and maintaining that, and that way it's communicated to the community as well.
Okay, I just want to make sure, how many questions do we have? Because we're about at the halfway, okay, a lot, that's not a number, but okay. So I want to make sure we're getting to their questions. I just wanted to let our awesome panel know that we want to keep taking these on, so.
You saved me from having to tell you to speed it up a little bit.
Okay,
Okay, the next question is, are Findlay City Schools staff applicable to pay the 1% levy?
the only people who would pay this 1% earned income tax, first of all, you must reside within the school district. So we know that we have some neighbors that have a Findlay address, but they reside in the Van Buren district. They would not they would not be able to vote on this, and they would not pay this. So you've got to be a resident of the school district. And number two, you must have an earned income. So people who are on fixed incomes or they only live on Social Security, they would not pay this 1% earned income tax.
So just to clarify that question, yes, if FCS
yes.
staff do live in the district, yes, they pay the 1%.
Yes.
Okay, next question. In November, there was a $6 million deficit. When did it become 12 million?
It's just a misunderstanding. It's always been 12, it's between 12 and $13 million is the amount of the deficit. So it might be confusing. $6 million in cuts was always the first year cuts, $6 million in cuts. Second year, if we continue to fail at the ballot box, will be an additional $4 million, and the year after that will be the balance, which is 3, or whatever it needs to be. We have to stay fiscally solvent. Okay, so without any success at the ballot box, we're going to have to continue to cut every year based on kind of where we are with our finances at that point in time. But right now, the plan is $6 million of cuts. Next year, $4 million of cuts the year after that, and an additional 3 or whatever we need the year after that without any new operating levy funds. Sorry.
Just to clarify, because I don't want anybody on social media to go nuts because we can't pinpoint an actual amount. The reason for that is because we are still waiting to see what we're getting from the state. And that happens every 2 years, so it's a moving target for us. Right now, we're expected to lose about $700,000 in foundation funding from the state. Until we know what that is, we don't know what cuts we have to make, exactly to the penny. So when Susan says $6 million, $4 million, or whatever it's going to be in the third year, it's because we don't know what the income is going to be on the other side of our revenue.
Just one thing to add, that the reason that we have the $6 million now, and then we've got a staggered plan. We're going to be putting this out as we move across, and the reason being is because we provided this to the state as well. So this is part of our state finance plan, and so now we're going to deploy that as we start to move throughout the year if we do not get new finances.
All right, next question. Are any FCS staff getting raises in 25-26? If so, what percentage?
No FCS staff are getting raises unless they're contractual and already been agreed to. Does that answer that?
All right. Next question, would you be willing to exclude homeschooling families or ones that make under a certain amount?
From the tax? No, this would, again, it's hard to interpret what somebody means in the question, but just to clarify, if the homeschool family is a resident of our district and this is successful, they would pay, and they have an earned income, they would pay the 1% earned income tax. Also, to be clear, homeschool students actually have access to all of our extracurriculars, and they, so they could be in the musical. They could do the extracurriculars. That is state law.
All right. Next question, when funds are frozen, why do we not hear the cost of all the special needs children who they need and aid? How has that increased as more of those students join the regular classroom?
So in terms of special education, students on what are called individualized education plans, that is federal law. The law is IDEA, signed clear back in the 70s by President Ford. And so we must staff and we must meet the expectations of what the IEP says. And the IEP is created by a team, which includes the parent or guardian. So even though we have to continue to tighten our belts, some of that is federally driven, and we will take care of our students with exceptionalities.
All right. How many kids do you have, and how does that relate to the number of teachers that may be laid off?
So overall, we're over 5,000 students in Findlay City Schools, and the
5,482.
5,482 roughly.
Not roughly.
And I know it was a joke. Okay, math joke. The challenging, one of the things with the $6 million in cuts, again, we're at this crossroads, and when we look at these cuts, there were no pros and cons. When we're looking at our operating budget, what we looked at were cons and cons. And for example, there are going to be roughly a reduction in force of 16 elementary teachers. And one of the things that we had invested in, and our Board of Education had invested in, was early literacy and early numeracy, especially coming out of COVID. And so we kept our class sizes, especially at kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, as low as we could within reason. And those I'd say between K and 5 those class sizes are gonna be going up, so that's the impact there. I don't know off the top of my head if this one connects to the number of students on IEPs. Roughly speaking, and I can't do the math fast enough, I believe we are at about a 17% identification rate in the district. I see one of my principals nodding his head. I see two principals, so I've got that right. So whatever 17% is of 5,482 kids. That's how many students are on IEPs.
All right, at this point of the school finances and all of the cuts to teaching positions, how can it be justified to keep a newly created alumni director position that has a salary of $90K annually?
So I'll gladly take this and also take responsibility for this. This is a position, it's the Business Development Alumni Coordinator position. It's not uncommon amongst schools, especially our size. Even some smaller schools have them. But we met with a group of parents, researched the other schools, met with employees that already fulfill these positions at different schools, including Perrysburg, and they also have a staff. But we took a deep dive into the benefits to our community, our students, and our parents. The vision for this is a lot larger than what other school districts currently do with that position. But as a parent, just speaking from that perspective, and I'm sure many of you guys can relate to this, but fundraising efforts seem to be like every week. And if you had kids at different schools, you'd get like 2 a week, and then you'd have a little break, and then you'd get some more. So we wanted to streamline that process and make it easier for the families and for donations to the district to be able to distribute that correctly and to help teachers with grants so the teachers could actually teach and not worry about having to apply for grants. We also wanted the alumni director and the business development director to work on establishing a relationship with the community foundation to set up a Trojan Foundation like many schools have. So when we have large needs or wants, we have a process and a foundation in place that we can keep those requests away from the taxpayer and not ask for big projects. Like I said, the position itself was a need in this district for a long time. And quite frankly, as an alum, I'd never really had a connection with the school once I left. And developing those relationships with previous classes is a big deal, especially when you need things. And having events for alumni coming back, or visits to schools, or class reunions. I know from our class, and Danielle's here, but we have class reunions, and it seems like it's kind of all over the place as far as organizing it. So we wanted somebody to create that relationship and have that connection with our alumni so they felt welcomed back in our schools. But I want to touch on something just in her first year, and I'm not going to name names of employees, but she's connected teachers with 53 grants totaling $522,787. She has personally written grants totaling $116,692 with another $100,000 which is in the approval stage. The process of streamlining fundraising has been executed and narrowed to 6 district sales generating $61,991. Hopefully you guys as parents have felt that at home. Working with the Community Foundation, she's already secured initial donors for our foundation in the amount of $60,750. And she's also already organized many class reunions and visits back to the district, whether it be tours or school events. I don't know if you guys go to football games or things like that, but you'll see a banner in the corner that says, welcome class of whatever, and they have their own seating for games and things like that. So to me, this more than demonstrates that she's paying for herself. And it's all to keep a lot of this off of parents. In addition to that, a dream of mine and a vision, although she doesn't probably know that she's going to pick up this responsibility at some point. But as a parent, I always dreaded it's time to go get school supplies, especially when you have multiple kids and you're trying to figure out what this school's doing and that school's doing and what this teacher requires. So we're working on a process, or hopefully working on a process, to where parents don't have to worry about that anymore. They can just pay a fee and we'll take care of it. And when your kid comes to school, they'll have their school supplies. It's all about taking that burden off of parents. So to me, that's a big deal as a parent to have that responsibility taken off. But in addition to that, I know for a fact, and I've actually witnessed it, where she's developing relationships with businesses all across this city, which gives our kids, our students, access to be able to go present about what we're doing here at Findlay City Schools. It gives them the experience to have that type of environment in front of the business community, to be able to share in all the celebrations that we have going on here at Findlay City Schools. So I can understand where somebody would question the newly created position, especially with all the cuts. It's pretty clear to me with what has happened already. She's well worth it, and quite frankly, I'm afraid somebody's going to steal her from us.
All right, we're at 6:45. Here's our next question. If someone affluent wanted to donate a large sum to help the school system with its budget issues, would there be any prohibitions regarding accepting this? I mean, like millions, not me, of course. Is there any reason that this would not or could not be accepted? Thanks, Steve.
Okay, so many school districts in the state of Ohio actually, there was, back in November, Ohio had the most school and levy issues on the ballot out of all 50 states. A record number of renewals failed. So we are not the only school district in this situation right now, unfortunately, but numerous school districts are wrestling with this right here because we are a proud community. We have so many amazing resources, so much synergy across this whole community. And again, we know that at this crossroads that we're at, that we are part of just quality of life. You know, I've dedicated 29 years of my career to public education. And we know, and I think that that's where Steve's question is coming from. I think there's the empathy there that we're on the ballot. The Board of Education is actually going to take up this very issue at their work session next week on the 17th. And then they have a Board of Education meeting on the 21st. And why is this such a challenging decision to make? Because why not just take the money, right? If somebody's going to write $1 million check, take it, right? The issue is when we are making and taking up $6 million in cuts across all of our operations, where does that donor want the money to go? Is it just to this program for these children? But what about these children over here? And then what the board is going to have to wrestle with next week is the potential inequity it's going to create across the opportunities that we have in our district. And so right now we don't have an exact answer for this because we know the pros and cons of either, well, they're all cons. But either way, we decide. But they are going to be thoughtful about it, and they're going to be discussing it publicly on the 17th and on the 21st.
And if anybody wants to write $1 million check to our foundation, you can get a hold of our business director and alumni coordinator.
Okay, 2 questions in the same realm. If FCS needs money so bad, why was there spending for new office furniture and furniture in the atrium outside the cafeteria? And the next question is, where did the money come from for the furniture in the lobby outside the cafeteria? Was that a necessary expenditure when times are tight for everything?
So, and help me out, but some of these wheels were in motion prior to us being on the ballot in November. And again, permanent improvement money that Susan referenced earlier in the conversation is a different bucket than operating. And then we are trying to continue to enhance the feel and really the vibe at Findlay High School. In fact, after the musical a couple weeks ago, I had an alum, he just graduated, and he said, I just graduated, now you did this with this amazing furniture. That was grant funded through our student leaders. The Trojan Trailblazers actually put that grant together for that. Did I miss anything on either of those? So that was student-led.
Okay, next question. Please speak to the $13 million estimate for revenue generated by the 1% earned income tax levy. Is this a conservative estimate or a midpoint? If revenue comes in higher, i.e. 17 million, 20 million, et cetera, how will the board treat the resulting surplus?
Well, the first part happens in January when the certification, do you want to just quickly hit on the certification process?
So actually, we have to send information or a request down to the Ohio Department of Taxation, and they give us estimates, and then they actually certify it once the Board of Education makes the decision to do 1, 1.5, 2. So we don't calculate that number, they calculate it for you. And like we said, it takes 18 months to collect it. So they're very, very helpful about the timing of it and how much we'll collect. And it's in my other 4 districts, I had an income tax, so I'm pretty aware how it works. And they're very accurate. And they do, but also remember, in 2009, when we had the economic downturn, we also lost $6 million overnight. So again, they're very good about keeping you informed of the rise and fall of the income.
And then if any of the board members want to jump in on the last part, my take would be there wouldn't necessarily be a surplus. The idea is that with the property tax and the earned income tax and diversifying those revenue streams, that we will intentionally not be back on the ballot for as long as possible for operating dollars. And remember, costs are going up. So they're supposed to coincide.
Well, I would just say that, I don't think it's really going to be off that much because it does come from the Department of Taxation on, what people are making in our community that have to file their taxes with them. So they have a pretty good idea about how much 1% earned income tax would generate here in the district. And I would say, the board doesn't have any plans, at least not that I'm aware of, to spend a bunch of extra money. I think the idea would be that we save it so we can stay off the ballot and we'll add things as we see that we can sustain them. So that would be my answer to that.
Well, and I mean, you've cited this before. I mean, the other thing we could talk about is the base salary of our teachers in comparison to comparative districts. It's below. And then our administrative costs are in the bottom 13 to 15% in the whole state. And so, again, this is about hiring and retaining the best people to provide the school district that this community deserves.
And to further on that is that the intent is that we are in this together, that we will rise and fall as a community. So when we have a surplus and again, the state is really driving, what this income percent will be. But if we do rise, we will adjust where we're spending that, and if we fall, we'll make those adjustments as well.
Okay, it's 6:52, so we're going to speed round it a little bit.
Speed round, okay.
Get through as many as we can. What fundraisers have they had since knowing of the deficit?
We don't do that from a board perspective, but, I mean, we can answer that and put it on the website if you'd like.
Well, and also, just to give a little perspective, and then we'll go to the next question, there wouldn't be, like, we couldn't do a bake sale and, pay, and this is a good question. This is a good question. But the operating budget, again, one payroll is $2.2 million. And so even when we get to that vision of a foundation, which is a force multiplier so that we reduce the tax burden, we can do these extras for our kids, the operating budget still needs the support of the voters.
Okay, next question. Why have period times been cut, programs like certain languages been cut, and testing scores decline, and this hasn't been a prior conversation with the community?
So I wonder if this is about the high school master schedule. Actually, the time for a class is the same. They went to a modular model, which is a really innovative schedule, to meet the needs and personalized schedules for students. So actually, the class period time amount, I'm looking at Katie, is the same. For whether if I'm sitting in Algebra 2, it's the same as last. Okay. Let's see. Testing scores decline. One of the things that I would say here is that on our last 2 state report cards, 5 stars is the maximum that a school district can earn. And 2 report cards ago, we were at 4.5 stars. The last report card, we were at 4 stars. So we're actually exceeding state standards. Now, having said that, and we continue to say this, we are not exceeding Findlay standards. We're not exceeding our own standards here. There's a lot of depth to these reports. But we know we have a long way to go, so I appreciate that comment. We know that we have a long way to go to get back to what Matt was talking about. How old were you?
I'm 45.
No, like,
24.
when, honestly, when the scores were where this community expects. So that's why we need this infusion of the operating dollars.
Real quick on that. And I think here's a good example of that is in 2020 when we had the ESSER funds that the state provided to us, we were able to deploy those dollars strategically. And by doing that, we were able to increase our test scores. So that's where you can start to see if you deploy the dollars in a strategic method, and then you can start to see increase in your academics really quick. And we were able to do that pretty fast and efficient.
And I would also just say, just from an expectation standpoint, and Dr. Hatton is very aware of this, but from a Board of Education, we're not going to be happy till we're a 5-star district and all of our kids are excelling. And the only way to really do that is to get additional resources and funding. And we've seen just a small piece of that with the ESSER funding from 2020 and carrying us forward and what we can do with early literacy. And you start to cut that back and we drop. So that's just evidence that we can certainly use the money strategically to help our kids out. But Dr. Hatton is well aware of the expectations of the Board of Education and this community.
All right, next question. What has FCS done to help inform the community on how to take action to change state laws like increased property taxes not going to schools? Think of the Ohio libraries and how outspoken they've been to change laws.
I am the legislative liaison from the board, and I talk to Ty Matthews and Rob McCauley on a regular basis. In fact, Ty will actually text me whenever a question comes up if he's in a session. So we are in conversation. We need to have more conversation. I actually just attended a meeting last week from the Ohio School Board Association, so all the schools in Ohio. And our voices are being heard in regards to the Fair School Funding Plan, which is something that I ask all of you to be aware of. Fair School Funding Plan is something that we all need as a public school to be implemented fully. So our voice is being heard by our legislators in funding that and also making the calculation for that funding to be relevant in 2024 costs, both from a wealth side and also from a cost side. They've been trying to mess around with that formula a little bit. 2024, use those costs, use that wealth, and that way it will lead to a truly fair school funding plan. And yes, we are on it as a board. We are talking to our legislators. We are talking to other school districts across the state about what's going on at the state capitol on a regular basis.
And as your superintendent, I'm in touch with my professional organization's government liaison down in Columbus weekly. I too, and I can speak for the county superintendents, we are in constant contact with our elected officials to advocate for public education funding.
All right, coming up on 7 o'clock here, our question is this. There are 2 columns of the earned income tax that does not show listed in the FCS website under financial. Your handout does not list all the exemptions that the website lists.
Good to know. And we will double check that. And can we set this one aside and make a star so that we update our information, please?
All right, who paid for FFE to go to Orlando?
That was a self-funded trip by FFE. Well, yeah, here they are. The folks that you see not only volunteered, but also, the parents.
And who pays the bill for Millstream students to go to competition?
That is weighted funds from the state. So the state gives weighted funds for career tech, and that is to be spent, they're restricted funds and have to be spent for Millstream. I mean, get to be spent for Millstream. You know what I mean.
All right. When the levy passes in May, will the busing be an option again for those less than 2 miles from the schools? For example, we live by Glenwood, and our son will be going to Bigelow Hill. That's quite a distance for a 3rd grader to be exempted to walk and making it difficult for parents to work to help support the levy and the school.
So I'll take this just from one board member's perspective, but the busing thing pains me just as much as it does everybody else. And if there's anything that we can do to save busing, I think it's our responsibility to constantly take a look at where we are financially. Like I said, we haven't received what we're getting from the state as far as a biennial budget. And, I have nieces and nephews and I don't even know what they would be called, maybe cousins, that are younger that are going to have to walk a long distance to get to school. And on top of that, we are trying to figure out how many kids we're going to lose that are going to end up homeschooling or going elsewhere because we don't provide busing. So will busing come back? Will it come back if the levy passes? I don't know if it'll come back right away, but certainly I think in the future we're going to have some sort of compromise on that to be able to. I don't expect a kindergartner to walk 2 miles to get to school. Like I said, we're all going to have different opinions. That's why we're a board of 5, but I think it is our responsibility to take a look at this every single day. And we do. I mean, we have conversations every day about different cuts, where we're at, what's the state saying. I can share with you an email that, I was emailing the treasurer a couple times when the new House budget came out about where we're going to be at, what's that affect to us. But we're constantly looking at this, all the cuts. It's not, a hard, this is what we're doing and nothing's coming back. Like Dr. Hatton said, there will be some things that do stay permanent. I don't think busing is one of those.
That was actually our last question for this evening. That's all we have time for. So I'll turn it back to Dr. Hatton.
Does anybody have a closing?
Yeah, because I
Okay.
know you got mad at me last time.
Well, no, you got mad at me. You got mad at me because I shut it down.
Yeah. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming out and everybody that's watching at home. Certainly, this is a very important issue, and I wanted to clarify, I know we didn't get a question about it, but I see it on social media. The addition to where people are confused of the high school is actually Millstream and was state grant funded. We are not paying for that, just so everybody's clear about the expansion that's going on at Millstream. In addition to that, a lot of people that I've encountered that are against the levy, they may have one gripe here or there, or one issue that's drawing them to a no vote. And I would say, I understand, because certainly when I went to school here, I didn't agree with everything that happened at Findlay City Schools, but I still loved it. And if you're going to hold the district with a no vote because of it, I would say, hold me accountable. Hold me accountable in November. If you don't like decisions that are made, put that on me. Don't hold the kids hostage. And then in addition to that, I would like to recognize some people that are in the crowd today. We have some city council candidates, at-large candidates that have been supportive of the school levy, which would be Heather Carlin Kensinger, if you'd like to stand up. Reed Needles, Mr. Brad Wagner, and then we have 3rd Ward candidate Carol Smith, 6th Ward candidate, I'm going to say Captain because that's what I'm used to, Captain Rodney Phillips, and 7th Ward candidate Brody Yingling. So we appreciate all of you being here and being supportive of the schools.
Again, thank you so much for your passion for Findlay City Schools. Let's please give a round of applause for our facilitators and our panel. Look for more town halls in the future, and go Trojans. Good night.